I am still sick as fuck, so I look like shit, and you're just gonna have to fucking bear with me for a while. Today's episode is brought to you by cancer. Check the description box below to see how you too can die an untimely death at the hands of a horrible disease. And remember to use coupon code NECRO to get extra carcinogens added to your next pack of smokes.
Excuse me! What the fuck are you doing?
Hey, wait. If you're down here, who's steering the... Sluggerfly, the developers of Ben and Ed, decided they wanted to make a 3D platformer in the vein of the superest of Marios and the temporal headgears. So they did. More blanket statements that add nothing to the video would go something along the lines of it being published by Head Up Games, a publisher whose repertoire we have featured part of before. Yes, I mentioned those two titles for a reason, and now I'm going to mention a third. Do you remember Croc, Legend of the Gobos? If you don't really worry about it. If you do, I'm going to ask you to keep it in mind as we seek to question how much you're able to get away with lifting to craft a greatest hits of other titles while still attempting to be your own thing. Y'all know me. I've got a hate-fuck relationship with corporate bureaucracy, so when this little biznatch popped up in my recommended, I jumped on that shit faster than an ex who routinely choked me and may or may not have tried to stab me at least twice, based on whether or not I filed the police reports. Featuring 5 hub worlds to explore, each containing sublevels, Sluggerfly asks us to delve into the corporate hellscape that is, well, hell, and collect ingredients to make our boss a pie for his birthday in what can only be described at this point as a 90s animated comedy spoof of some of the greatest 3D platformers of all time. This is Hell Pie. You are Nate, a lesser-known demon, no archduke in the wretched city of Dis or greater demons such as gluttony or wrath. No, you're a demon of bad taste. Which means I can definitely identify with you. Which puts you pretty low on the totem pole. This is a story all about how your life got flipped turned upside down. So one fine day as you're hating your life, Lucifer gives you a call and tells you to go check up on the chef who is supposed to be making his favorite pie for his birthday. And yes, we're going there for pie, but he brings us the cake. Chef tells you to go to the supermarket and collect pie crust and a cherub, which is named Nugget, who then acts as your Spider-Man /Bionic Commando style grappling hook. From there, he sends you off through a short series of worlds to collect the most vile ingredients for the most vile of beings for his most vile of days. And you know what? It's really fucking fun! Its art style is disturbing yet cute. Graphically, it doesn't do anything super neat, but aesthetically creates an absolute nightmare of cutesy 3D platformers. I mentioned Croc and how it was just other games, and while this game will feel a lot like that, it has its own special twists of corruption, taking everything cute and charming and making it cute and horrible. Less Crocs, now that's what I call platformers number 37, and more of a hat in time if it was made by Joe Murray.
Psst. That's the guy who made Rocco's Modern Life.
A hell of a lot of this is going to feel familiar, from the first level being a beachside town with whaling, to having to swap headgear for special abilities, and then the list will go on. It starts off hard and fast with a painfully heavy sense of been there, done that, but instead uses that to ease the player into the world they've created and the challenges they will face. And yes, that is where problems will start to show up. It's not a long game. 93% completion netted me just under 9 hours for a 3D collectathon platformer, and for the price point, that's a pretty solid amount of gameplay, but it creates a subtle nagging feeling very quickly when it comes to the question of unlocks. Sacrifice sheep for horn abilities. No, seriously, mash A to rip off their horns, collect cans of cherub food to unlock extra abilities. Cool, sounds nice. Only problem is each world will take about 90 minutes if you want to unlock every ability, and if you're the kind of guy who has spent his entire life grinding through platformers, you're going to easily rack up collectibles and upgrades. How easily? Well, before I even finished the first hub world, I was already sequence breaking the game, and the second hub just had me bypassing its gimmick entirely. An over-compartmentalization of abilities and mechanics quickly trivializes the game and leaves me wondering just what the hell the point is, but maybe I'm getting a little too ahead of myself here. World 1! Them beaches, aka Sashimi Bay. Beaches are the fastest way to get me into your game, and here is no exception. It's absolutely beautiful, and we're introduced to a lot of what we'll be looking at throughout the rest of the game. The first thing we're introduced to is a new horn ability, the Thrusters. They let you run a bit faster, but if we collect enough sheep in the level, we can unlock our second horn upgrade, the Ram Horns. Charge up a dash that breaks metal crates, armored enemies, some walls, and deals damage. But you also have a regular dash for breaking small barriers, and late in the game you can unlock an upgrade that lets you deal damage. So essentially you have 3 dashes, 2 of which deal damage but answer the question of to who and what, as well as one that lets you move faster, which you need for later sections but raises an even bigger question of why the hell I needed 3 different forms of dash in a game that clocks in less than 10 hours. But that's a question for a little later in the game. As for right now, we're going to encounter a couple things we can't yet complete, as well as our sub-levels. Sub-levels will generally feature a linear series of challenges that net Nate one of the 3 ingredients he needs for the pie. 3 sub-levels per each, with an ingredient themed around the sub-level, and 3 ingredients in each hub with their own theme. Cute! The third sub-level in the beach introduces us to a lizard drug dealer who hands us a gun and asks us to go introduce lead to some other lizards. It's a nice break from the swinging gameplay, as holding items and weapons prevents you from using Nugget. It's not deep, and it's certainly not going to blow your mind unless your name is Kurt, but it's solid and it breaks up the gameplay with enough jokes and references to act as a welcome reprieve. Speaking of jokes, the other 2 sub-levels involve entering the sewers to save horrible poop-eating monsters from Nazi poop demons that have captured them, and entering a sushi restaurant inside of a whale for the purposes of blowing it the fuck up. Yeah, they're gonna go some places and not give a fuck, and it tickles me fucking pink. It really takes a lot of the greatest hits we know from platformers and goes the Saints Row 2 route. It's staples we know, with a willingness to make a joke a lot of people would question regardless of whether it's really all that bad or not. It also helps that each hub has a very unique design and aesthetic, with each sub-level featuring their own designs and aesthetic. You're going to be constantly seeing new things, and it's a very strong start to the game. Then comes the second hub, the Flavor Peaks. It's a much more vertically focused restaurant-themed world. It's built more out of platforming challenges, asking the player to exercise their skills and face new challenges. And I had already collected enough upgrades that I was just doing the platform as a courtesy. I was already bypassing everything they had made. There was no reason for me to do any of it, and I was just doing so to slow myself down and do a better job scouring for everything I could find. I'm sure it has more to do with making sure the game can be completed with minimal upgrades, but upgrades come so fast that I remind you, I was already sequence breaking World 1 and was outright bypassing the entire challenge of World 2 before it even began. My own bullshit aside, World 2 has great level design. It's absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure a run without upgrades is a great challenge and experience, but I was bypassing segments that required an upgrade I didn't even have yet, and I wasn't even halfway through the game. This will then go on to get worse as we go, with the game only being able to present a challenge when it forced me to stop using Nugget. The world is built entirely around Nate's platforming ability, but the main gimmick of the game completely trivializes and worse, oftentimes outright erases all that hard work. Remember Croc? It's the same crisis of identity. You can throw in all the cute soundtracks and references to Monty Python's The Meaning of Life you want, but when your absolutely broken pole climbing detection means nothing as I never have to even do it rears its ugly head, we start encountering some problems. At some point, I don't even remember or care when, we get a piece of headgear that lets us open light gates. These are supposed to be hard, but the ones in the first world would have been easy even if I didn't need to wait until the 3rd chapter to unlock them, and by the end, the most challenging they can get is still easy to bypass entirely. The charm takes a bit of a hit when I don't even have to look at it. Make no mistake, when the Tom Jones style track is playing in the club, I'm absolutely loving it. But when everything else is more about the sights and sounds because the gameplay is circumnavigated by itself, you need to go a little bit harder than they went, I think. This would be a hell of a lot easier if I wasn't still sick as fuck. It's all about world crafting, and for the most part, yeah, I'd give it a 10 out of 10. It's creative and clever and populated perfectly. They know what they're doing when it comes to making a world to explore, but the soundtrack is very hit and miss. When it's hit, it's absolutely hilarious, featuring tracks that parody the kinds of things you hear at your favorite restaurants, or dance tracks that I swear I can almost hear lyrics to in a sort of fever dream of an uncanny AI recreation, and more. But when it's a miss, I start to wonder if it's even there. I remember some serious highlights in the soundtrack, but I only remember the highlights. Remember Croc? Croc did something that I find is the most underutilized thing in gaming music. Jazz. Jazz lends itself to a lot of artistic styles and styles of gameplay, and I think a lot more games would benefit from using it as the basis of their soundtrack. This has nothing to do with Hellpie. I just used my comparisons to Croc as a jumping off point for making a broader point about the severe lack of jazz in games where it would fit perfectly. Moving on, one of the biggest issues with the game is spurred on by the overcompartmentalization. Useless abilities. Gain a bounce that after performing an air dash, you hold B and can rebound off the ground. It's hard to use due to requiring you to dash and doesn't launch you as high as a regular jump does. 2 health upgrades in a game that struggles to kill the player with anything other than pits, allowing you to recharge the use of your grappling hook while in the air, multiple upgrades before you will actually be able to stay in the air long enough for it to have an effect. It's incredibly questionable at times, making me wonder if it's not all that great, but aside from world building, level design, and OST high points, do you know what is great? The fucking Polish! I mean, polish. The fucking polish. It's been quite a while since I've played such a solid game from such a no-name team in a long fucking time. I'm hateful and incompetent, but I never once felt like the game screwed me. Everything is responsive as a motherfucker, and you learn how everything works so quickly that it's almost impossible to fail from something other than your own screw-up. It's a very rare thing for me to recognize how screwed I am at the same moment I panic press a button, but everything is so solid, streamlined, and honed that every time my lizard brain mashed, I immediately knew how bad I had fucked myself. I only ever encountered a single bug where I used the grappling hook to swing myself into geometry. Once. The only issue I ever fucking found with the craftsmanship happened once and then never again. You get Nugget some 15 to 20 minutes into the game, and by the 30-minute mark, you've mastered the mechanic, which then leads to you unlocking new abilities, which are then easily incorporated into your mechanical repertoire, creating an absolutely wonderful feedback loop of awesome. Being able to bypass like 80% of the platforming challenges didn't bore me. It made me feel powerful. It made me feel like I was quickly learning, mastering, and taking on a higher level of challenge. A bad game being able to be bypassed is usually a joke. It's a tragedy you laugh at. But when a game is designed to get the player to hone their skills, take risks, seek new challenges, question the limits of what's put in front of them, and it's polished to a mirror fucking shine, it becomes a thing of beauty. I wasn't upset that by the start of World 2, I was bypassing everything they put in front of me. I was squealing my head off like Spooter Dude the first time he did a web. To top that off, by the time I had reached the final hub world, it was asking me to push my skills even further than I had before, even when breaking the order they had set things. I collected shit you were not supposed to get when I did, and they still managed to push the challenge even further. Even when they've given me the ability to trivialize everything they've made, they're now making me question if they secretly wanted me to all along, like asking, so what? What can you actually do with that knowledge? How far can you stretch every little thing? Combine dashes, swings, and horn abilities all on the fly as you recognize you might have fucked up, but recover just by the skin of your teeth and ask yourself, wait a minute, was I intended to do that? I don't see any other way to have gotten here. Did they want me to do it this way? And realize, yeah, maybe. Maybe I'm dumb and lucky, or maybe they had faith in everything they've instilled in me. That's some fucking game design. Fuck the overcompartmentalization, fuck the useless skills. World building, great level design, a soundtrack I can vibe with a lot of the time, and the mechanical polish and inventiveness to make me feel good, even when I'm screwing up. All cobbled together with an aesthetic, art direction, and comedic writing that just kept me coming back. I didn't want to put it the fuck down. From the time I started to the time the credits rolled, the worst the game got was a fucking laugh a minute. I could have easily ignored the overcompartmentalization of skills. I could have ignored the useless skills, but they do represent a problem for guys like me who have been around the block 8,000 times and will easily find enough collectibles to max out really quickly. In fact, if half the skills were just axed, it wouldn't harm the game. But you know what? They don't matter. You'll know what you need to prioritize pretty quickly if you're not so good at scouring, and that's a pretty damn good way to go. Overall, Hellpie does what Croc couldn't. It didn't just exist as a 3D platformer greatest hits, it flipped them on their head with a style of humor that has been severely lacking since the turn of the millennium. I wish there was more to the soundtrack, and I wish I could purchase it, but from start to finish, you're going to have great things to look at, great things to laugh at, and an absolutely great thing to play that feels great to do so. Polished to a smoothness that is unparalleled in other games with grappling hooks, and always looking to surprise the player. Best yet, I think I can get behind the $25 price tag. I think it would have been better at $20, but I think $25 is the absolute terminal of what I would find acceptable to pay. its problems are few and far between, and even then aren't really that detrimental to the game in ways that I would call tangible. Oh, remember when I mentioned we previously looked at another game published by Head Up? Well, here's your Pumpkin Jack costume. I'm the Necroswanson, and I'm sick as shit still, and this was a nightmare to get through.
What do I do, Lord? Destroy the child. Corrupt them all. This is their plan, people. These are demons. Just like the Bible says, it's basically an intergalactic invasion into this space through people. I'm telling you, it's what all the ancients said. It's what they warned of. It's what we're dealing with. They're demons. They're frickin' interdimensional invaders, okay? I'll just say it. Make fun of me all you want on CNN or wherever, but everyone already innately knows this. These people are not frickin' humans, okay? Hillary Clinton is a goddamn demon.
Isn't it just magical that the first thing I did in this video was get the developer's name wrong?